You are listening to Within Tolerance, a podcast for machinists by a machinist. I'm your host, Dylan Jackson of Protean Machining. And this week, I'm happy to bring back, we still owe them a 6-hour special, Jeff Tiedeken. Welcome, Jeff.
We're getting there. We're counting down the hours.
Yeah. For anybody who hasn't heard his past episodes, he was on episode 48 and then 110. And we are just, I'm having him back on because he's had so much change even since the last time he was on. So give us the update, job, new machines, all the stuff. What's going on in your life?
Yeah, lots of stuff happening as usual. Yeah, so I was working at the doing a bunch of nuclear stuff for a long time, quite a few years, all through kind of the pandemic stuff, and then took a break. Then that break as normal, shorter than I wanted it to be. I had great plans of going and exploring and riding mountain bike and canoeing, but that went short lived. I got an opportunity. Actually, it was kind of aerospace company reached out and they were looking at potentially like buying my small shop because assets were super hard to get. And it was pretty random because I was like I don't really have anything compared, but yeah, I think like it was a combination of like my tools that were hard to get and me helping the project, and it worked out pretty good. I ended up deciding not to sell, which ended up being probably the right call. And then ended up going to work for this small satellite company to help them build some cool product.
And you also were tasked with building up this shop, right?
Yeah, it's kind of awesome because like one of the best things that I have like right now in the Bay Area is this amazing connection network, working with Selway Machine, knowing the Matsuura family, just having like this awesome database of who's where and what and when, which actually worked out really well to like our advantage. Originally, when they wanted this aerospace company wanted to purchase our equipment, we were like a little bit hesitant because we have like the one Matsuura and we had some Haas's and stuff like that, but it's like it's pretty limited in size. We pretty much specialize in like the small stuff. So I was like, you're gonna buy all this equipment, we're still gonna have to buy stuff. So I pulled some strings, worked with Andrew Selway and Preston Hill and a few others, and got it in touch with the Matsuura family. We actually found out that they were shipping a bunch of equipment to IMTS, which actually worked out super well. Basically, like did a little negotiation to acquire some of the booth machines that they just landed in LA and were on their way to get shipped to Chicago. And we ended up just like getting them shipped from LA straight up to San Francisco. And I started building out the shop. And it's pretty cool. It's like kind of weird. It's like when I go to work, it's like a Wayne's World when they built that set of Wayne's basement in that studio. It's like the same feeling because it kind of feels the same because like the building we moved into has a kitchen, like very similar to where like my kitchen is next to the Matsuura. So it's kind of like oddly like, but it feels and it looks like my house, but it doesn't really feel exactly like my house.
Right. It's like an artistic interpretation of your house. Like if you gave ChatGPT, like, hey, this is what my house looks like, rebuild my house.
Exactly. It's a little out of scale. No, it's super cool. And it's pretty rad. So the company is called Astranis Space. You can check them out at astranis.com. The main goal with them is building this small, high performance, miniature geostationary satellite. And one of the main, difficulties is just building stuff. So the goal there was just to kind of help bring stuff in house and use my aerospace background to kind of help build the project. It's super cool too because it's actually like it's kind of wild. The building that they had me move into was a machine shop in the late 1800s and was a machine shop like basically all through up until about the early 1990s. And its specialty was basically building battleships, then does submarines and back and forth. And they also built some of the BART tube, which is like the subway like transit system. They built a lot of the tunnel in this building. So it's pretty wild to like get to be recreating a modern machine shop in this old building. And it was actually pretty wild. I gave a tour the other day to an older gentleman. So we've been getting a lot of press lately and an older gentleman seen our stuff in the newspaper, and so he reached out to the company. He wrote a message to the company, and then like they linked him up with me. And he had actually worked in that building back in the 60s. He's like probably in his like, I don't know, he's got had to be probably in his like 80s. And it was so interesting to give him a tour of the building now that it's like full of all this like super awesome like satellite production facility, aerospace clean rooms, aerospace welding clean rooms, like all
Oh
these,
man.
and it was like kind of weird because like he knew the building so well because he had spent like 30 plus years in this building. But like it was like kind of like this weird emotional like tour for him, because it was also like I think it was weird because I think he's seen a lot of himself in me, and it was really fun. It was super cool. It was pretty special. So pretty cool to kind of keep the dream alive in this building.
Yeah, that's killer. I mean, imagine it's like when you go back to your childhood home and you see other people living in it and it's different and everything, it's the same bones. It's I'm sure it's very emotional.
Yeah, it was super cool. And I give a lot of tours, but that one's like it's just extra special too because there's like huge appreciation for that level of work. Like, I mean, we kind of take it for granted nowadays. Like, when something isn't going right, we just like throw in a new block of metal. We just start it
Right.
over. Like that level, that like era of machinists. You were already like days and weeks into machining components, and like if things weren't going right, it was you turning hand cranks, going back like another week and making it. So a lot of appreciation to like the people that built that stuff back then and doing it by hand. Like it's a little bit humbling sometimes when you have to jump back on the Bridgeport and like you're like, this is where I started, but man, it's like it's a lot of work. Like we take it for
Yeah.
granted nowadays.
Yeah, I can't remember who it was in my early career that said manual machinists have the stress the entire time, whereas all of the CNC machinist stress is front loaded. And it's like once you get that first part off, you're like, all right, I'm good. Whereas the manual machinist, it's like I've got 6 ops left, and every single part has to be babysat, and I need to make sure that everything's going to be okay.
And classic engineer, he's like, well, like you get it off the Bridgeport, and he's like, you know what, we should just make one more.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Oh, actually, I needed this hole a little bit further over. Sorry. Can you
Exactly.
try it again?
Start completely over.
Yeah. Well, so you mentioned some of this machinery. Let's get into what you bought and why for the shop.
Yeah, totally. So, one of the interesting things about building, machine shops, I've built a bunch of different shops now for different companies, kind of help companies go from zero to like wherever they are now. And it's interesting, like I've kind of created my own little version of it, and I do it in these phases. And a lot of it is not only for financial side of it, so it's not a huge overwhelming burden on the company, but it also like allows for the company to grow in a sustainable way. And I learned early on, like if you go too fast too quick like that, you know you start to be the eyes on the company. Like the company starts to see this heavy burden of expenses, and they see you burning all this money. And then if the machine sits for like 2 days, everyone's like, what, why do we even buy that? And so like the approach on this was a little bit different than like past projects. So there's a build it in phases, so we're going aggressive on each phase, right? So our first phase was basically just to buy three pieces of equipment to kind of get the ball rolling, max those out, and then we're getting ready here to buy our next phases. And so this first phase was basically just like, think about the satellite as a whole, and think about like if we were to have a vendor drop the ball on us, we could provide in-house like kind of security to provide every part of this satellite. So from the biggest part to the smallest part, the most complex part to the simplest. So we picked a bunch of different machines. So VF6, that kind of covers our range for big componentry, like big plates, everything from tooling to flight parts. We went with a Matsuura MX850, and that's like such a beast of a machine. It's such a rad machine. It's got like basically you can do like a 37-inch like circle like drum on it. So it's big. It's not massive, but it's big enough for what we do. Then we got a 330 with like a PC10. This is our first core phase. We have some fab tools and bridge ports and like a hard hinge clone and stuff like that for the manual equipment. But really, the main focus is like build the team, maximize the capability, then add another person and more machines. And so like the goal is always to have like a 2.5 machines per person kind of ratio as we grow. And that way there's like never any point at which like people at the company see the machine shop as like a heavy burden financially, and like, it's always being productive.
Yeah, totally. So how much does that PC10 run? Are you guys keeping that pretty well fed? I mean, I don't know how far along Astranis is in design. Like, do you have dedicated models now that are, fully vetted and you guys are producing them? Or is this still a lot of R&D where you're making, oh, we got to change this, oh, we got to change that. And,
Sure.
and that's why you guys have the PC?
Yeah, so like the interesting thing is like in that early phase, I really didn't know. Like it's always hard because you like you want the Swiss Army knife, right? Like, you always want the bigger machine so you can make the smaller part, but you don't want too big of a machine, And so like, then the interesting thing about Astranis, I'll give you a little bit of background. Company's been around for a few years. I've been at the company a little shy of 2 years full time. And basically, the goal with the whole entire operation is to basically build a geostationary satellite. So, if you're not familiar with geostationary, kind of give you a quick comparison. There's Geo and there's Leo. There's other orbits, but these are the two that most people talk about. Leo is low Earth orbit, so that would be basically like space station. Also, Starlink's up there. A lot of little test projects, and like most of things we think about space is in low Earth orbit. Basically, like across the horizon, you only have a few minutes of like, so if something goes by like the space station, basically it's like 7 minutes, or every 90 minutes you're going around the Earth. Then you have geostationary, which is basically about like it's 20 something thousand miles or 36,000 kilometers out from the Earth. You actually get to this point where like your Earth rotation becomes stationary at this point, right? So if you go any farther out, you're out of it. If you go any farther in, you're moving faster. So there's this sweet spot in this geo belt, as it's referred to. It's pretty special, right? And it's basically like it's really important that you like respect these like spots as a satellite builder. Everyone's fighting for these different spots. You want to park your satellite directly over these spots. And so to give you kind of a comparison, so Starlink works in a pretty unique way. It looks at a very vast range of horizon. So as the Starlink goes over, it has to go from like basically left to right or right to left, either way. But it has to go like every few minutes. Whereas geostationary is like what we're commonly familiar with, like Dish Network, where the dish stares at a standardized point forever, right? So we're building a geostationary satellite. So what's really unique about that is we have to deal with these super super extremes, like so extreme range of temperature, 300 degrees C, from hot to cold. So we're negative 100 and something, and we're positive of like 100 and something C.
Holy cow.
And so we go through eclipses, which is wild because basically we have to run solely off batteries. We're like in the coldest, like we're almost negative 200 during an eclipse. It's about 45 minutes long. So we have to not only supply internet through that eclipse, but we have to be able to like run solely off battery, keep the fuel from like freezing. It's a lot of work. And so we have that, we have radiation, we have all these other problems that like we have to overcome. And so it's a pretty tough spot to be in. Not to mention just getting there is like a huge ordeal, right? And so Astranis is like totally kicking ass, is pretty amazing actually. Like to see. So we just had our first launch, and I can actually say it as of yesterday afternoon. Like we had a successful launch, and our payload started talking, and we're providing like communication back and forth from the ground to the satellite and back and forth over Alaska. So we built this prototype satellite basically to provide Alaska with internet service, mostly like dedicated on islands and like different reservations and spots basically that have had low amounts of satellite service. And one of the main reasons for that is like most of these geostationary satellites that have actually been put into orbit are usually planted over the lower 48. So the beamline is very, very direct over the lower 48. So what actually happens if you think about like a globe, your beam, you're just getting the last bits of power kind of hitting the top of the globe. And that happens to be Alaska. So they've always had satellite. They've never, like, the satellite internet has been there, but the problem with it is it's not a big enough population density area to basically need a dedicated satellite. Astranis came up with this really unique way to basically miniaturize everything that these large satellite companies have been doing for a long time into a small, like, refrigerator size satellite. It's also pretty unique as it's a lot of people that have worked at SpaceX and other space companies and basically found this like kind of area on Falcon that is kind of a void that works really well for building this satellite. So basically, our satellite is kind of like a barnacle underneath.
Oh, no way.
And so we actually ride along with other geostationary satellites. Like we might go up with something like a Garmin satellite and we can launch off underneath it the point at which we want to drop off. So it's pretty unique. We can actually ride along, and it helps companies that are bigger satellite companies subsidize their launch, and it also allows us to get where we need to go. And so by designing this tiny little satellite, it actually allows for us to do some pretty unique things. And a satellite, that's about the size of a refrigerator is actually pretty close to the right size to provide Alaska with enough internet bandwidth. So it's super cool to be part of it, and it was really unique to like be at the company when we turned on the payload and like to see it communicating. So our first test the other day was pretty rad. We actually sent a video of the SpaceX launch up to the satellite and then sent it back down. So it was like kind of wild to think this thing like traveled that far up and back. And like, yeah, it was, and we had two laptops sitting on the table. If you go on YouTube and search up Astranis, you can watch the video that just got published yesterday. And that was kind of our like little bit of a press release on it. And so it was super cool. It's like, it's been involved in a lot of space stuff, but this is a pretty unique project. It's kind of a one of a kind right now. So it was like pretty special to be there for like and help out from, a good part of that first build all the way into like now we're into full production. So we're basically building them in blocks. So we just reserved a dedicated SpaceX launch for the end of this year. We have another one coming up in the summer this next year. So the goal is we're in full production, and that kind of leads into like where we're going with the shop. Like originally the shop was kind of a prototype shop. Now it's turned into a full blown production shop. Like, and that PC-10's been running pretty much 24 hours a day since we bought it. So yeah, we're kind of realized real quick that maybe the PC-10 actually is like a little bit undersized for what we need. We need to go to probably the MAM or the Trinity, or it's
Oh
time to
boy.
spend some real money. So it's
That's
cool.
awesome.
Yep.
So at the beginning of that, when you were talking about building the shop, you had mentioned, you've done this a few times. You kind of have this reputation. And one of our questions from Nicholas Graham was, as someone who has created a reputation as a one-man problem-solving machine, how did you get people early in your career to trust you? And did you do anything specific to demonstrate your skills in ways that people reacted?
Yeah, I think the initial way to start that is there's no one man. It's definitely like, the thing is like at the end of the day, like my true love is being a welder and like a machinist. And if I think like honestly, my problem solving is just working around a lot of bad engineers and a lot of good engineers and seeing what works and what doesn't, and then like just having a really good memory. My saving grace is, is just remembering a lot of things and cross pollinating. I mean, like it's pretty wild. Like I think back to like some of the things that I've worked on and some of the projects and some of the people I've been around, and it's like that's the core there. And like, and not to mention like there's like it's a whole team. There's just no way. I mean, there's no one person on any of these things, like especially the satellite, like, or this nuclear reactor, or all these things, like even like working on sending stuff to JPL, like half that stuff's going to go in the scrap bin. Like you're just like, hey, if you add this, and it's all that like value added. And so I don't know. I think maybe my Instagram makes it look like a one man show, but there's definitely like always a team behind me.
Totally. But so, like, do you remember the first large scale project you were put in as the head of?
I don't. That's a good question, actually. I feel like I've like been in charge of a lot of projects. I think it's I don't that's a good question, actually. I might have to think about that one.
All right. Yeah. We'll
But yeah,
circle back to
yeah,
that.
that one's actually that one might stump me. I feel like I've been part of like so many teams and so many projects. Like this is like one of the things that's interesting like about my like kind of my career, I guess, is like, I like go and work for myself and I like love it so much, but then I like miss this element of being part of the team and like, and missing like the whole package. And then I go back to working a job and then I'm like, oh fuck, this sucks. And you go back from working for myself, and then I go back and I'm like, fuck, it's so lonely here.
Yeah.
And I go back and forth, and like I think like that also has like, like kind of shaped me. It gives me new talents, I guess, like, and then I go back and it's like, and so I don't know. I mean, it's really hard. I mean, if I've done like a lot of projects, I can't really even think of like one that I feel like I'm like I would even want to take claim. I've been on such projects with teams because they're so big and they're so involved. Yeah.
All right. Well, before we get off machines, we had a ton of questions about the Matsuras.
Oh yeah.
So let's get into those.
This is
Jared,
not sponsored.
yeah. Jared Raining asked, "What do you like and dislike about the Matsuura controls, and what kind of tolerances do you normally hold?"
Yeah, the Matsuura control is a pretty unique one. So it's kind of an interesting one when you go from using something like a Haas, right? So I get this question quite a bit. Like people are switching over from a Haas to looking at a Matsuura or Heidehain or like all these different operations, different controllers and stuff like that. And I have a lot of experience in all of them. So it's kind of but the Matsuura one is pretty unique. Like number one, like one of the main reasons why I kind of picked the Matsuura is like I have like such an epic team like that helps me at Selway. Like not only like helping me financially and like making sure I like get the best deal or financial assistance when I find a good deal on something or if some trading happens like I'm like the first one offered like that's like number one of like why I've kind of like started to go kind of Haas and Matsuura back and forth. So like that, but the control is an interesting one, and so like what's really interesting about the control is like it, if you're a Fanic person, it's like you kind of know the drill already. But Matsuura has their own kind of unique twist on the Fanic control, but I really like it. It works really really well. It has a lot of stuff. Like I feel like I need to go to Japan and hang out at the factory and just tell them like what you need to do is you need to buy a Haas controller and bolt it onto a Matsuura, and you will have built the best machine possible. like literally, the work speed and like the fast keys and the way you can move on a Haas controller is pretty unique. Like you can get really fast on these like Fanic controllers and stuff, but there's still a lot of built-in safety things. So like what takes a little bit of time to get used to is really just things like let's say I want to like do something, I have to like turn a key like from basically manual to auto, and it's like some safety stuff, and I think a lot of it sometimes is like a kind of a Japanese culture, like safety culture on a bunch of that stuff. So there is a lot of things like that that add a little bit to it, and it's weird because now that like I pretty much run them every day, I don't really think about it, but it does take a little bit of time and people get a little frustrated in the beginning. Like, they're just like, oh, what the fuck? Like, this is the stupid little key. Like this key doesn't need to be here, right? Like, it would be like the same as like on for Haas people, like, you have the little key on the side there by the light switch. It'd be like imagining like every time you're going to do something, you had to turn that key and then type something in and then turn it back, right? So, like, it does get a little repetitive on some of that stuff, but I wouldn't deter someone from buying it because of those little things. there's a bunch of like interesting things, like, it's kind of a hybrid of the Fana control, so it does have some like cool UI, and like it has a little bit more bubbly screens than what a normal Fana controller looks like. But really overall it's pretty much the same. All the controllers are like kind of the same, but really it's like, man, the Haas controller is like, it's just such an awesome controller. You can just go so fast, and it's like simple things like the thing I'll leave with the controller is like, one of the things that like drives me crazy is like just being able to write, I look up in the Haas and I see Pocket 10 has that tool, and I just put in P10 and like tool change forward, and it comes around, right? Like that doesn't, you can't do that on Matsuura. You can't
Right.
just look in the window and say, tool 87 or pocket 87, and it comes up. You have to go to a list and you have to do it. So it's like there's a bunch of little things, and like I don't know, some of that stuff probably there's probably a way, but and then yeah, for tolerance stuff, like one of the main reasons I've kind of started to like push that way is, you know, materials are getting more and more intense, I think, in my life, right? Between Invar, Inconel, Hastaloy, like, 700s, 600s, like all the titaniums, like grade 5, like, all these like 15 grade 15s, like grade 1s, like 2s, like all these weird exotic, like all these harder materials. And I just started realizing just like the Haas, like, it does a great job, but then there's just a point, like it's crazy if you put a Haas UMC next to that Matsuura 850 and you made the same exact cut, like it's pretty wild. You would know the Haas is struggling. And the Matsuura, it's crazy. That 850, some days it'll be cut in titanium. We won't even know it's running. I have to go over and look at it in the window. It's like so amazing, like how beefy that thing is. And like if you look at some of these, like a DMG, DMU, like the way it's constructed, same with the Matsuura 850 and a bunch of the Hermle, like the Kumas, the way they're constructed is like separating things so you don't have stack ups. So like a Haas, you have a linear way on top of a linear way, so you have like some movement and some harmonics that go between the different linear rails. So these machines, they have like separate everything, right? So the linear rails for X are on a casting. The casting has the Y axis. You don't have overlapping rails, so you get this like extremely tight, super rigid machine. I mean, looking at the rails on the 850 is crazy. They're like 2 inches wide.
Oh
They're
man,
so massive. It's awesome.
that's killer. So this might be a good time to talk about you replacing your personal DTs then with another 330.
Wow, I got one still. I can't get rid of it.
Oh,
Those
do you still
things
have one?
like, yeah, well, I had two of them, and then yeah, then yeah, so just sold off the one. And the main reason there was a customer that Selway had that was trading in one of their Matsuras to get a bigger one, and so I actually kind of wheeled and dealed, and yeah, I got a super good price on a used 330 to add to the other 330 I have. So now we got two of them in the house, and then we still have one little DT1 that's also set up for 5 axis, and that one's got everything. It's got scales, it's got everything. It's like $150,000 DT1, which no
Jeez.
one, just as a note, no one should ever buy $150,000 DT1. That one actually was built specifically for Apple. Apple decided to back out of the deal, and ended up buying other Hauses and other machines, but that one ended up staying around, and then I got a good deal on it. So I ended up paying 50 grand for it, and it was brand new. So
Holy
it was a pretty
cow.
sweet deal, and it came with a trunnion and everything. So it's pretty stout little machine. I gave that one. I say that one's Crystal's machine, so she runs it all day. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah, I just
So
assumed you didn't have room for two 330s and a DT. So I was like, oh, of
I
course you got
know.
rid of both.
I had this plan the other day I was talking about. I was like, because I got all the like toe jacks and stuff. I was like, so if I cut the roof off the house and I slowly raise it like an inch a week, like aesthetically you shouldn't be able to see the roof going up. But every year it'll go up like a few feet so that I can build a mezzanine in there. That way the building inspector has no idea what's going on.
Right, yeah, slowly over
I
the
probably
course
just
of
blew my
years.
cover because my guess the building inspector listens to the
Of
podcast.
course, yes. I'm sure. Jack Vanderpoels asked, "Do you actually use the flat surface on the side of the C-axis that's on the
Oh,
Matsuras?"
on the 850, yeah. So
Yeah.
it's actually pretty interesting. So only time we use it, actually, it's pretty unique to do it, but sometimes like when we're like super backlogged on jobs, or if we have these goofy jobs where like let's say we just have to cut like or drill a hole in the end of a rod or some or mill something goofy on like keyway or something like that and put a hole in the end. So we'll use those on the side of the machine to basically clamp like a long bar on it. We also do every so often, like if there's something booked up or if we're already switched over to that machine to a certain metal, we'll put a Kurt vise on the side there, and then we'll do first stage in there, and then we'll do the fifth axis in the center, and then sometimes we'll even put one on the other side. We did like years back. Autodesk did a belt buckle. I think it was Tim and Al and a few and CJ. They did a belt buckle with Matsuura and Selway. And it was pretty cool. They basically kind of showed exactly that same thing. First stage was dovetailing. Second stage was 5-axis, like milling everything. And then the last stage on the right side of the table was taking the dovetail off. So it can be totally usable. Though, there is another option for a table, which is like a big 700 millimeter table. If you're doing like big gears or something like that, and you're not going to be like getting to the center of the table, it's definitely a cool table to have, but it's an option. But if you have to get to the center, the table is so big that it basically hits the spindle. So you only want to do it if you know your parts. Otherwise, it's kind of go with the other table. Plus, it's cool because that table is also the same as like the 520 if you get the standalone, so you can switch back and forth tooling.
Oh, cool. That's very cool. So I imagine alongside with these Matsuras, you guys had to pick up some inspection equipment too. What have you had to do for that?
Yeah, so we do still do a lot of on machine inspection on stuff, but we bought the Mitutoyo crystalline CMM. So basically, I can do 3x6 part. Built the temperature controlled room, got it all dialed in. It was super cool. I mean, the software that comes with the Mitutoyo is a little bit difficult to get used to. It's definitely got its quirks. I'm sure some people listening have used it, have their gripes. But I mean, the accuracy of the machine is insane. It's awesome. It does a great job. The support's pretty good. Like, yeah, overall, I mean, it's been good. It's brand new, so that's been a lot of fun to actually get to kind of get into that. A lot of times, like doing all these prototypes, you don't spend that much time doing like that really intense inspection. So it's kind of interesting because with the satellite, we have to learn a lot about what things do. So we do our own in-house inspection when we build the part. So we build the data map like of the parts that we're building, and then we send them over in our other building. And we have these different. We have a different environmental lab like that not only does heat but does cold. So we have thermal vacuums. So we chill the parts down into like we'll sometimes go to like negative 180 C, and we'll actually like let the part relax that way. We'll put it in the oven and then we'll bring it up to 150 C, and we basically let the part kind of, and we're like riding sometimes borderline of like a kneeling on some of the alloys. So we bring it up there and then we let this material relax. We'll take it back out, put it on the Mitutoyo, and like we'll watch what moves around. Because one of the interesting things about the spacecraft is like you might have a 300 degree C difference in temperature from one end. It might be 2 feet apart. It might even be 3 inches apart. There might be that much of a temperature difference. If the sun is hitting one side, you're at 100 and something, and if you're on the cold side, just it could be literally on the other side of a panel, it would be like negative. So it's pretty interesting. We have to we have to keep it going deeper and deeper on kind of the metallurgy, as well as like stress relieving, as well as like all the weird stuff. And a lot of that is like it's kind of like it's a bit of like just experience. It's a bit of kind of tribal knowledge, and it's also like a total bit of just like Wild West. So it's pretty unique to actually have a machine now where we can work on the reverse engineer of our own parts, which is pretty unique. So it's been kind of fun. Yeah, it's a weird range of temperatures, like, but on the other hand, like when I was doing nuclear, we were in the positive 600 degrees C, where stainless
Jeez.
steel was actually like turning like orange and staying orange 24 hours a day. We were like riding the fine line. So it's like, it's interesting to have all these jobs where I've been dealing with these extremes of temperatures and extreme alloys, and like, dealing with ceramics, dealing with, glass, dealing with metals. Pretty cool. It's a lot of fun. Like, there's definitely like a lot of challenges of like what you're gonna cut and how you're gonna cut it, and mostly just kind of like, I don't know, cowboy style, just going for it, right? Like,
That's awesome. So I wanted to talk about a little bit about sourcing parts as well, because you've been fairly vocal, I think, on
oh
Instagram
boy.
of, having all kinds of issues with, Xometry and places like that.
Yeah.
Why do you keep using them? And what is their value proposition to you that you keep going back? Is it ISO stuff? Is it ITAR?
Yeah,
Why do you use these
ask our
places?
buyers, right?
Oh, okay.
Well, a lot of it is like, what happens is like, it's loudest wheel gets the grease, right? So it's kind of like these engineers are working on these projects. We're on critical timelines. We have like really solid background of good machine shops that we deal with for flight components. And I've fine tooth combed every bit of our vendor supply chain so that we get not only like, ISO, AS9100, NADCAP, like we get like that high level of expectation out of our flight vendors, but like we still have this like large amount of prototyping and tooling and stuff that we have to work on. And a lot of that stuff is just like, it's not super critical stuff. It's plate work, like, it's flanges, magnesium stuff. We do a lot of magnesium. We do a lot of like plate fixturing for like our aerospace specific clean room welding stuff, fixtures. So it's not hard stuff, but like I've just been, and I don't want to like point out any of the vendors like specifically. You know who they are. They're like the classic online advertisements that are pumping, as much advertisements as possible like to these buyers. And the problem with some of these is they're going to China, they're going to India, they're going all over the place. And what's happening is basically, they're promising 10 days. Basically, they send it overseas, and they're trying to like hide. They started out with US vendors, they started out with good suppliers, they burn those. They like, now those relationships have been burned. They're turning to next cheapest possible spot. A lot of them are going to India, a lot of them going all over the place, and they're expecting that like overnight freight, like global freight, to get the parts in. And there still is American made parts that are having problems, but man, it blows my mind. Like, I don't know if it's like, the race to the bottom, like people getting frustrated, or if it's like just the lack of like detail. I don't, I've been really, really disappointed in a lot of the stuff we've been getting from some of these fast turn online vendors. And it's a bummer because like it just shouldn't happen. Like, we got parts in from one of them that said they were making them in the United States and clearly weren't made in the US. You can tell by the packaging.
Oh,
Coming.
geez.
And it's like that. We got one, I don't know, I put a picture up. We had some weld fixtures made, and the anodize showed up, and we went to wipe it down with alcohol, and the anodize wiped off, right? Like,
Oh,
we got
no.
one part that was like some face fittings that were turned that had so much chatter on them. If you tighten that fitting up, the face to face contact probably would have had like a spray pattern coming out of it, like a fan. Like we had that. What else did we have? We've had a lot of parts show up that were missing features, missing holes. We had, oh man, I just like, it's a company that starts with an X, and I've said, I've sat in so many one-on-one meetings, yelling at the CEOs, the quality directors, just over and over and over again, like just such frustrating meetings with them. And like went down every possible path to try to like solve this whether it be every part was shipped from the vendor to this company, they did an in-house inspection before they sent it to us, still pass or still failing, like, still failing things. Like, it's just super frustrating. Like, and I think it's like, as these companies, these fast turn companies get greedier, they're taking more off the top, trying to cover like their high marketing, high advertising costs. They're leaving less on the table for the people actually doing the work, and it's super frustrating because it's tarnishing their reputation. The good shops don't want to work with them. The good shops are tired of it. They like realize that it makes more sense to not take the work and wait for a good job with less stress to come along, and then make the same amount of money. Like, it's kind of weird because like mentally it kind of messes with your brain. Like, you feel like you need to take that work sometimes, and so you're like really frustrated. You're like, I gotta take it. And sometimes saying no is like actually the right call, but it's a hard one to grasp. It looks like an easy job and it ends up coming back to bite you in the ass. And so it's frustrating that the people that are doing the work are and a lot of it is like when you actually learn the margins on some of these, that's when you get frustrated. Like, I didn't know the margins on some of these companies until I seen a lot of the back, the behind the scenes. Then I got really frustrated.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, because it just it's frustrating all around. I totally understand.
Especially when you go on a job board and you see like parts for $50 a piece, and you're like, I'm gonna spend $35 on per piece on material, and by the time I buy a drill, and then when you go behind the scenes and you realize that they charge the customer like $480 a part, and
Yep.
basically you're like, they're gonna profit $400 off of just connecting the dot, like, and that's the part that's frustrating because like it's gotten gradually greedier as it's gone along, and it's a really like huge bummer to see that like some of those companies have tried to protect some of those legacy vendors that did good work, but they're fading out. Like, they just don't want to deal with it anymore. I mean, the safest company out there is probably Protolabs, mostly because they've built their own in-house system, and kind of works, but who
Yeah,
knows,
even
we'll
they have
see.
their own
Yeah.
issues for sure.
Yeah.
Oh man, well that's a bummer. Do you think that that's fuel that you can use though to kind of incentivize your company to buy a MAM or more automated machinery so you can pump out easier parts like that?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I try not to use that though. I mean, it's also like it's kind of like it's like ammo that you want to have, but you shouldn't use all the time, right? And so it also speaks volumes like when we're cranking out good parts and we're doing it as fast and as easy, and then we can go throw it back on a machine and do a modification. So, a lot of times like not being the loud squeaky wheel is more volumes than and so it's important, and not to mention, like, I mean, sometimes if you bring that up too much, you end up being the shop that does all the nickels and dimes, and all the stuff that you want to make gets sent elsewhere, so
Right.
it's also important to like find that balance where you're not burning out your team or yourself working on nickels and dimes, that you're actually doing the value added. So I'm totally okay with sending stuff out, and that's totally great. We have a great network of people, and we're always looking for more. But a lot of it is just like, yeah, picking the battles so that we're not like kicking our own ass.
Yeah, I think that totally makes sense. So you had when we had talked about you coming back on the podcast, you had said you wanted to talk a little bit about building your own shop while working at a day job. So let's get into that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was pretty interesting topic. I've gotten asked a few times about it, and it's always interesting because it's like a weird perspective, because it's sometimes hard because like I think like when we're looking at social media, we're like fed such deep, like we see everyone buying new machines, we see people like upgrading, we see people landing sweet deals, and like I think there's always this like factor drive to like go faster, go faster, go faster, and like push all the cards in on every hand, and like and it's interesting because like the only the thing I wanted to like talk about it because I've seen it a lot lately, and like and it's just mostly like it's a question that comes up quite a bit to me because like I think people see that I'm like somehow balancing like this like home shop, that's making still tons of money, but also like working a full-time job and managing a whole team, like heading up manufacturing. So it's like it's pretty interesting. And so, the like one thing I just wanted to talk about was basically like just remind people to like pace themselves and like just remember that like sometimes it takes a long time to do this kind of stuff, and like, sometimes like going outside of your means to buy something immediately because you think you need it and sometimes it's hard, we're fed like all this stuff about buying all this stuff. And I was thinking, because we were talking, because you had brought it up about, it's crazy, you got the Matsuura now, and like you went from Haas, and I'm like, I was thinking back, I was like, nah, it's a Bridgeport to a Prototrack to a Prototrack to a Fadal, Fadal to Haas. And each one of these was dirty, hammered, and beat. And so don't get me wrong. And I was thinking, like, I didn't have any money to start, and I've just been around good people that have always kind of used machinery dealers that have been friends of mine that have been willing to like lend me, like they're basically like kind of self finance, like, pay me like $2,000 a month, right? And I'll get you this Haas, right? Like that kind of, mindset. And I was just thinking back and I was like, man, sometimes we get sucked into this and we go outside of our means. And I just wanted to remind people that it doesn't sometimes it's super important to remember, like, sometimes like the long road is the best road on certain aspects.
Totally. So let me ask you this, because you know you were talking about social media. On social media, you seem like someone who has limitless energy, who can work all hours of the day and can balance these things. But I imagine there is some tips and tricks you can share with us on balancing two workloads, because it's not like you are at a day job that you can kind of fade into the background while you're working. Mostly you're leading projects. So how
Yeah,
do you
yeah.
balance all of this?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it like is also just knowing that like you knowing your boundaries, right? So, every so often like just like going back to like, accepting these jobs on the job boards, these nickels and dimes, right? So, it's really important to like balance yourself out, right? So that you're not overwhelming yourself with nickels and dimes, right? These nickels and dimes are interesting too because like when you are building a shop, you have to remember that like if you're taking on like a lot of these nickels and dimes, like you're looking at like like I did a lot of this work for a long time, so I have like a really good idea and example. But let's say we take on a job for $100, right? But we have to buy a bunch of drills and we have to buy a bunch of this stuff because we don't have a lot of this stuff yet, right? So every job we take, we're basically like net neutral or net negative, right? But
Right.
like we're building assets, right? And so it is really important to still build assets and buy tools and build equipment. And you can sometimes use these jobs as your like way to kind of build assets and tooling. But it's really interesting sometimes, like, if you get too out of control, these end up just driving your life, right? You have all these nickel and dime jobs. You're driving across town, going to the anodizer for a $40 job, and it's like, and so like, when I tried my best to try to find this balance where I can, manage a team and like also be able to be involved in all these major projects, and a lot of that has just been able to, find myself to like know what is important and what's not to like take on, and know like if it's something that like really actually excites me as well. Like a lot of my limitless energy comes from the fact that I'm like completely in love and driven on this craft and trade of building stuff, welding, fabrication, forming, like molding, everything. Like I'm like, and so some of my love is just working into the night of working on stuff. And so that's one of the reasons why I can keep going a lot more sometimes. But yeah, like it's interesting. It's definitely like everyone's different, everyone's unique, but finding that balance point of being able to, pick those jobs and make sure that you're taking on the right job and that you see something in the future from that too, whether that be assets, whether that be financial, or whether that be skill, to make that worth it.
Okay. Well, so what do you think your top two or three red flags for a job are? Like when something comes across your desk for your home shop, what will make, besides, just stupid low pricing, but like what are other things that will make you just go, nope, this is a no quote, or like this is something we don't do.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of it is just dive into how much you're going to spend like on it financially, right? So if you got to put a lot into it, I mean, that's like one of the main things. Like we kind of take it for granted sometimes because we're just like we all love to buy tools, right? But like at the end of the day, we also like to eat too. So
Right.
it's like really important to really dive into that. And then a lot of it is also just like thinking back to what you've done before, like what parts have you done that are like this, what can you use as an example, how did you approach it. I mean, sometimes like it looks easy to begin with and the last 10% of it is the hardest part, you know. We have parts at work that are like that where it's really easy to get to a good point where it's like a wall. Like getting over that like last 10% is a wall, right? These are the trickiest parts where they're the thinnest and most difficult to like hold fixture and do all that stuff. And so like just making sure that you're like spending that time just thinking it out and you know, because the last thing you want to do is get yourself into a bind. And one of the biggest difficulties there is like you get yourself into a bind and it starts to derail you all the way through the day, the next day and the following day while you're at work, you know. And it's like you have to remember your day job should be actually your priority. And even though you like mentally think it's probably not, it is your priority. It's also your safety net right now. So like making sure that you're actually still in the right mental state and like doing a good job at your day job is really important. And so um, picking those that allow you to kind of like finish at a good point, like you know these jobs might go on for weeks, but knowing that like there is a point where like you're you know you can get to these stopping points every day, or you know someone else can help you load it or whatever. And so that's like just being able to have the mental capacity to go in the next day and no one at that job knows that you're like cranking at the night, you know. Like if everyone at your job knew that you're making more money at night than you were at the day, then so but if you look tired, you know, then like everyone's gonna have a problem with it. And so like it's super super important to like you know find that balance so that you're not dragging.
Totally, yeah. Is there anything you won't touch at your shop? Like, for example, Brad and I, we just decided after a few jobs that we just don't do composites anymore. Like, no
Yeah.
FR4, no carbon, because we just don't like that's a coolant flush for sure. And that's,
Yeah.
respirators and stuff like that. And so we just say, nope, that's an instant no quote.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a bunch of that stuff. And you know, like a lot of that stuff too is like if you want to be, you know, if you want to get that efficiency when you're first starting out, like it's it's easy to say yes to everything that comes in the door, right? And it can be totally out of your realm, right? It's like someone that's having you do a bunch of things and they're like, "Oh, I want you to like help me weld this fence." And you're like,
Right.
okay." Like it's like totally out of my scope, right? So like figuring out a way to like also just narrow your scope and make sure that your scope is narrow enough so that you do have that extra capacity to still go to that job, you know. And there will be a time where like maybe that job is, you know, it's time to change it up and it's time to go work for yourself. Like, but you don't want to get to that point where you make that decision and your company's happy to see it go. Right?
Right.
You want to leave with your company being pissed that you're like thinking about leaving, right? And so you know making sure that you know have that capability is super important. And so narrowing that focus is like one of the most important things. So you know if you have a small like mini mill in your garage, like you're not taking on parts that are you know 48 inches long and you're like, oh great, now I got to call around to a shop and try to find some shop to like do this and do that. You know sometimes being honest with the customer is actually more satisfying to the customer. And there always is a risk, don't get me wrong, like you know sending a customer away can be like dangerous, right? But also like you know like when you build a relationship with someone, it's also really important to like you know help them in the best way shape or form, right? If you have a part that's 60 inches, tell them about the shop down the street, you know. And it's like when you're at work and that shop's getting the work like done, like you know, and it's getting done and you it's off your plate. And it's a little bit of a slow road to building a business, but man, it's like it's kind of fun and enjoyable and relaxing. You're not super stressing and pinging out super hard. Like there's always those times, but like it's definitely a different pace at doing it. And so yeah, I mean, it's not for everyone, but it's definitely like one of those things where I always try to like talk to people about it, and like I just like to let people know that it's okay for it to take years to do this. Like it's easy to get sucked into the Haas financing, or it's easy to like go on eBay and buy it now, but it's really important to remember.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And it's one of those things where it feels like such a long road.
Yeah.
And then looking back, you're like, man, I feel like it was yesterday. Like I
Yeah,
know
exactly.
when Brad and I first started Prodium, we had this just insanely naive thing of like, okay, so like in 6 months, we'll be self-sufficient and we'll both quit our jobs and we'll be working here full time. And it took 4 years or 4.5 years for one of us to go full time. And
Yeah.
yeah, it just, but also looking back on it, I'm like, that was the quickest 4 years of my life. Like this
Yeah,
is,
yeah.
it was both a long time and just yesterday. So
It's
yeah,
also a great opportunity to like kind of find what you want to do and not have the pressure and the stress of like having to immediately decide, right? Like maybe you buy a mill and a lathe and you're like, man, I just want to do lathe work, right? And you're not like pressured to have to immediately take jobs in. Like you can set up, you can dial tooling in, you can build libraries, you can like really get it the way you want, and like you have this like safety net of this day job, and then when you want to go on your own, you're like ready to rock, and like you have the right mental capacity and you're like ready, and you're coming into it like refreshed. You're not coming into it tired, like, which is kind of a special unique opportunity. So yeah, it's that's like I think about my first machine and I think about my like current machines, and I'm like, man, it's been such a road. It's
yeah,
been, but it's cool. It's like it's also happened really fast when you think about it, like what you're saying.
yeah. Looking back on it, it feels so weird, like thinking how long it's been and yet how short it's been.
Yep.
All right, I want to get a little bit into a project recap on for
Oh,
you because we
great.
had just a million questions about your projects. Uh, like 4 or 5 people: Molyneux, Huffy Built, Fry Fabrication, Bob 67, and Valus Precision, and I think more. All asked, "What's going on with the espresso maker?"
Yeah, I cut some parts for it recently. I cut some like titanium yokes and some stuff. I've been getting really into like investment casting and also like sand casting. So I'm working on a goofy project for it. I want to basically build this crazy like auger. Like it's kind of like if you took an injection molding like machine, like an electric injection molding machine. I want to make that into like the portafilter. So I want to
Oh my
grind the
god!
beans and I want to feed it into like basically an injection mold, and then close it and inject and then have it open up. And so I've been sketching up some of the yolks and stuff I want to have sand casted.
Oh my goodness!
Dude, I can't finish this. I mean, and like, remember, it's going to be like when I'm 92 years old is when the first cup of coffee happens. So
Right, it's
don't
your
worry.
retirement gift to
This is
yourself.
going to be every podcast we do is going to have this question in it. So it'll happen sooner or later, but we're going to be really, really old by the time we get that first cup of coffee. And I always like to remind everyone that it'll probably taste like shit. It'll probably be the cup of coffee that gives me like copper poisoning or
Oh
something.
no. I am struggling to find it, but someone asked for a plane update.
Yeah, the plane. Yeah, so I got most of the fab stuff done. We're pretty much like Crystal and I are pretty much at this point where we're ready to kind of start assembling the wings, but we need to get everything powder coated. So I basically want to assemble the wings and I want to put it on and just do a test fit up. Problem is we put two Matsuuras where the plane was supposed to be.
Oh
so
no.
so like we have the plane in our living room currently, and it's the only spot we can get it to fit. But it's cool. It's actually like a really nice thing to have in your living room. So it's cool to look at. But yeah, I basically need to like get it off to powder coat, get that stuff done. I've been just kind of waiting on powder coating just in case I wanted to change something, but I feel like I just got to fucking coat it so that like it kind of like locks it in. No changes.
Yeah,
Design freeze.
just get it done. Bob 67 asked favorite bicycle you've built, and then we also had somebody ask, are there any current bicycle builds?
Bicycles or motorcycles? What do you think?
I think they're probably talking about bicycles, but
Okay.
Nick also asked motorcycles.
Ah,
So we'll get into that next.
not much bicycle stuff lately. Just like a bunch of miscellaneous stuff. Been building for a few different big OEM companies. Lots of like little 5-axis stuff for suspension parts and stuff like that. That's kind of my contribution to the bike industry. Bunch of little parts and stuff. But yeah, I mean, overall, I mean, I always have this dream of building bike parts back in America. It's cool to see like the fifth axis guys doing it. It's pretty inspiring. Like it gets me pretty excited about knowing that like they're building fifth axis vices and they're building the whole entire US bike industry back up like in the same shop. I'm like, damn, this is like it's crazy to see these guys are like cranking out the money. Like
Yeah, seriously.
uh, yeah, they basically picked the two most expensive things you could possibly think of in life: bicycles and centering vices. But yeah, I mean, not much bike stuff lately. I mean, honestly, the satellite project is getting the satellite to this point of getting it in space. I mean, it's crazy how much stuff like, I'm picking up kind of on like the a point on the project where I'm kind of three quarters, like half to three quarters of this first satellite, this prototype. A lot of it was designed, a good majority of it was built. It was kind of being like somewhat assembled when I started, but like really I just jumped in at full speed. We did a lot of ground support stuff, like everything that is used to fuel it at SpaceX, everything's used to lift it at SpaceX. I spent most of my time just kind of helping the team building stuff like that, and that's just really just consumed. It's kind of intoxicating. This company is kind of like if you imagine what JPL was like in like 1969 or 1975, right? Like
How cool.
it's like everyone's young, everyone's so excited about space, everyone's got tons of like space or weird backgrounds, everyone's just so excited and it's like intoxicating. I find myself there like 10, 12 hours a
Holy
day and I'm
cow.
like, damn it. Like, and I work with like a bunch of really good dudes that like are super badass, like machinists. I have one guy that I work with, he's been a aerospace welder for 30 plus years now. McDonnell Douglas, Boeing, Raytheon. Fuck, like he ran like a large majority of SpaceX's weld shop for a while, like both down in Starship, both in Hawthorne, jumping back and forth. He was at ABL for a while, like, and like me being an aerospace welder and getting to work with someone like that is like so rad. I get to like learn so much and I get paid for it right now, which is super cool. And it really is like it really invigorated my like love for aerospace welding. Like it's what I started out when I was like 15. I had this dream of like running away from my parents' house and all I wanted to do is burn argon. I moved to LA like when I was 18. I did an interview at a place called SpaceX. It wasn't even in Hawthorne yet. It was in El Segundo. They said I was way too young and way too excited about welding, that no welder should be young and excited about welding as much as me. And I didn't get the job, which ended up ironically like 15 plus years later. That guy that interviewed me happened to be like one of my new mentors, like, and also co-workers, so it's like it's crazy to like think how it like circles back around. And but yeah, it's like I don't know, I just all I want to do is weld. And so to work around someone that's been doing it for a really long time and like also loves it as much as me, like to get to spend time in the clean room and like it's crazy, like just it got me so excited about it again. Like it was good because like I was getting to a point where like machining was kind of like I was feeling like I was hitting this point where I was like kind of plateauing out, where I was like, I'm getting good, but I'm like, I know I could get better, but I need to like commit to this to get to this next level, which is like micro machining and like all these other levels. But this welding thing just got me so excited again. It's awesome.
That's killer. I'm really happy to hear that.
It's fun.
Your friend and my Nick Valence asked, if you get cool again someday, what motorcycle would you buy?
Oh, I don't know.
Because he bought your last motorcycle, right?
Yeah, I felt like when I was moving the machines around, I was pushing the motorcycle in and out all day because I was running out of. And so then I just ended up selling it to him. No, I think if I'm gonna buy anything, probably a Harley Davidson trike. Nah, fuck that. No, just kidding. No, probably, I don't know. I like super into like, honestly, I just want a bike where I can just fucking go as deep into the forest as possible and also go like super far distances. Probably be like one of those Honda African Twins. It's kind of like an enduro, like Paris Dakar style bike. Put some big bags on it and just fucking go.
Yeah, those things are
Alaska,
super
like
cool.
wherever. Yeah. I mean, it's, yeah, I don't know. I just kind of want to just like go into nowhere. I think like I go from like this far extreme of like super tech involved, like, it's crazy. Like I was talking about the other day, I was like, when I worked for Elon, I had to have a shop space, and so they put me in the building with chat, which was OpenAI, now it's chat gbt. Right? And so I shared a space with those guys, and it's like I went from one end of the spectrum where like I was involved in like around these super cutting edge, I'm always like in this like super tech thing, but then I want to go like 180 degrees opposite, which is completely remote, no internet, nothing, like deep Canada, like nothing. So there's nothing really in the middle I want to do. It's just far one end or the other.
Nick also asked, tell us the craziest thing you have welded.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, the satellite's pretty cool. Like, I mean, it's always cool to see that kind of stuff. Lots of weird stuff to the bottom of the ocean. Lots of weird robots. I've worked on, I mean, Neuralink, as much as like I can say. I mean, Neuralink is like one of my things that I'm really proud of as being a welder. I figured out how to like build a lot of parts using welding techniques that I've learned over the years to build components that are the parts that basically are inserted into your brain during like the Neuralink surgery concept, right? So to be able to figure out how to weld stuff like that, that's probably the smallest and most precise and probably my biggest accomplishment.
Wow.
And it was pretty cool. I mean, we used to vacuum braze all the components, and I just came up with a different strategy, kind of combining my CNC background plus welding background, and came up with a way to basically weld components. And it was super fun. I mean, it was like in the early days, it was like 10, 12 of us at Neuralink. We were just having a great time. Like, and it was pretty wild, to help kind of speed up that project. So I mean, that was a pretty inspiring point to also, when you get to stoke out Elon, it's also pretty cool. He was pretty stoked on it, and it worked, and it was cool. And we basically just multiplied it, and we made it so we could make parts that we used to make two of them a day. We could get into the hundreds in a day.
Whoa, that's
So
crazy.
yeah, pretty wild. I mean, like to do like the Neuralink style things, like if you do a little background on it, there's like, what's publicly available. There's a chip, and then there's like, these like kind of tentacle looking things. So those tentacles, like, they're the pieces that are inserted in between blood vessels in your brain. And so those are like, they're extremely micro, like smaller than a hair. So to put a weld on them is pretty involved.
That's
So
insane.
yeah, that's probably one of the cooler things. And I don't know, honestly, like building bikes is also really fun. There's something weird about, you can build stuff for Boeing and you can build stuff for like, but some of the coolest projects are always the projects that are like the most simple and fun, you know.
Yeah, they make that emotional connection that you keep for a while. Metal Mark asked, is there something that you have yet to machine that you would like to? So whether that's a metal that you haven't, or a material, or just some kind of part that you wish you had machined.
Yeah, I'm like infatuated right now with like extreme tolerance, like turning, machining, like stuff that people are doing on the diamond turn machines. Like I just keep reading as much as I can, learning as much as I can, optics for telescopes. It's pretty wild. I think like it's kind of like where I want to go and what I want to know. I don't know if it's what I want to do, but Tom Lipton says I have too short of attention span to do that level of work. Maybe he's right, but basically, yeah, just these like, I don't know. I'm really just, I think like understanding how to even measure the stuff is pretty unbelievable. So there's that. I don't know. It's that like kind of world it's just like kind of unexplored for me. I'm also like, in the Bay Area is one of the special places for people that build mirrors. So a lot of the James Webb satellite was basically, the space telescope was built not too far away from my shop here in the Bay Area. And yeah, it's pretty wild. Like that's a special type of work to be able to grind, machine, and deal with beryllium. Takes a lot of like actual like sacrifice on your body, right? So you have to get your own, like when you're dealing with that level of beryllium, you have to get blood samples quite a bit, have to deal with a lot of just risk associated with it. And you could build up your whole career dealing with beryllium and then literally have something go wrong and your career of working with beryllium is done. So it's kind of an interesting world to be involved in. And I spent a lot of time working with beryllium on another project and with one of the main leading companies, Materion, which is also the company that built the James Webb Space Telescope. And so there's also like kind of like, I don't know if it's like the danger risk that I like. Like I don't know, it's kind of a beryllium is just so special and so unique, and its capabilities are so pretty wild. And then the other one that I'm really excited about lately, I bought a bunch of nitinol off of eBay.
Oh, cool.
So I want to build. Been thinking about a like basically a water jet or EDM'd flexure that I want to build for like a deployment project. And so I think like I like building these like really quick iteration versions of things just for my own curiosity. So those are some of the things that I've been kind of excited and intrigued by lately.
That's awesome. Well, that brings me to shop news and new things. Besides the new Matsuura in your home shop, anything else new or exciting?
Wait, what's your favorite? What or
Favorite?
what do you dream of cutting?
Oh man,
I'm turning
diamond
it on
turning.
you.
Diamond turning actually has been quite interesting to me lately. I think
Is it
that
Adam on Instagram posting all
yeah,
the?
yeah. I was talking
I
a bunch
knew
to
it.
Adam
I
and like
told
they,
him. I told him he's
yeah.
getting the internet excited about diamond turning. Also, just a quick pitch because this will be out before then. There is a diamond turning workshop that is happening out in New York. It is like about $1,300, and it's kind of, if you're in like New York, it's probably easier, but it's basically like a few days off for a few days, and then it's basically over like I think a 2.5 week period. So if anyone out there is like really intrigued by it, SpaceX has a bunch of openings. The pay starts in like the 50 plus, goes up into I think like $70 an hour. So it's a pretty good job if you can get it.
Jeez.
Yeah. There's a lot of good jobs in diamond turn right now, especially with the space industry. But this workshop is happening. I think it's like basically July. It's happening in Rochester, New York at the college. They have pretty much the same machines as Adam has. And so if anyone out there is listening and is super excited about it, reach out to Adam probably because he's probably the guy that knows the most about it. But I've been interested to go to that one. I don't know if my work would be interested in me taking off 3 weeks.
Yeah,
But
I mean, it's just such a foreign part of machining. Like you said, I don't know how to measure things in that. I don't know how to like even touch off tools or even how to think like you have to for a diamond turning lathe. So yeah, the whole thing just seems really cool.
yep, super cool. Yeah, lots of fun. I definitely am like, it's just also a massive barrier to entry. So having people out there like Adam and this other school in Rochester like having the equipment and willing to teach it and having the resources, and the Bay Area is really special for it too. Not only do we have like Lawrence Livermore Labs, we have Tinsley. It's now Coherent. We have a whole bunch of different companies just in the area here that really specialize in it. So there's this like epic industry that exists with these wild projects, like projects that like, take 10 plus years, some way quicker than that, but like historic projects. So like anyone listen out there that like wants something, like if you're like you want to be involved in some really wild shit, that's where it's at right now.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, what's new in your world?
Just cutting metal. Yeah, just getting ready. Been sewing a bunch. Kind of just, I think like the true test of your crafts is, can you sew up all your gear and then go survive in the woods for 2 weeks using your own gear? So Crystal and I have been sewing. We're gonna go up into Canada. We're gonna leave like northern Minnesota and go up into Canada, and hopefully our gear holds up. My sewing is a little rowdy, but she's super good at it, so I just have her go over it once. But yeah, it's cool. Like just canoeing and just trying to like, now that the satellite's been launched, and we are building the next batch of them, and they launch in the fall. And yeah, basically like getting ready to hire a bunch of people at Astranis. So anyone listening, we got some openings coming up for technicians. We have a bunch of machinist positions from kind of medium to entry level all the way up to like advanced level, like 5 axis. Yeah, just kind of just having a good time, just trying to go with the pace. It's been a little bit crazy. I'm trying not to get sucked into the economy thing and like everyone freaking out. I mean, being in the Bay Area is kind of an interesting thing too, because it's like I think everything goes on the extremes. It's like banks are going down, like people are getting laid off, and then I like step back and I'm like, wait, the people getting laid off are like these roles that really needed. They're like party planner, Facebook, right? And you're like, oh wait, like they're like cutting a bunch of these jobs because they're like, the news does a horrible job at like kind of explaining the roles that they're getting rid of, right? But yeah, it's like, yeah, I try not to get sucked into that. But yeah, mainly just trying to have a good time and get ready for summer, and it's gonna be good. It's like we got satellites up there and like having a good time.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Any new products coming from Cutting Time anytime soon?
Oh man, I wish I had a bunch. I've been so busy. Yeah, just working on just a bunch of miscellaneous stuff. I mean, the main thing I've been really dialing in is just how to produce them faster and more efficient. Just, with the cost of material going up and everything. So now we got the sprayers and all the pause sprayer stuff on the Cutting Time website. We got it all dialed in, so now we can make them faster. That way we didn't have to like increase prices with like the heightened anodize and the heightened material price. So that's been cool that we can keep it the same. It's cool. We've sold like a few thousand now of these sprayers, and I've like never imagined that it would sell that well. Like for like having zero advertisement and zero everything, just kind of like every day we put a few of them in a box and ship them out, and it's always super cool to like hear where they're going to, and like also like I'm sure like a bunch of tool makers out there are like listening, and they're like they know the feeling, but it's like also really special to build tools for people that are in the industry, because it's like a different feeling, right? Like because you're like, oh shit, this is gotta be really nice because the person that's getting this is knows how to make this probably better than I
Right.
do. Right? So like it's kind of also like a special feeling. Like as simple as it is, it's like also kind of, it's like a little bit humbling and also a little bit inspiring to like know that people are doing cool work. And it's cool when I like watch people's Instagrams and I see it on the Haas in the background, like, cleaning off the y-axis, like, and it's cool. I mean, that makes me feel good. I mean, now I'm not getting rich off it, but it's definitely like it's cool to see my like those products out there.
Yeah, definitely. It sounds very gratifying. Well, that brings me to the last two questions I ask every guest every week. First one up is, what did you research this week? Doesn't have to be machining related, just what's been popping up in your browser.
How to be better at sewing. So your gear doesn't fall apart in the middle of fucking forest.
So, what gear are you sewing? Are you sewing like bags or?
Backpacks,
Okay.
backpacks, bags, like all the like weird little stuff to like hold gear. So basically, like we're gonna go like about 2 weeks. We're gonna be fully remote. So leaving northern Minnesota and Boundary Waters, going north up into Canada, fully remote, going up camping, like, and then cutting back down. over near Duluth and dropping back in. So it's always like a little nerve wracking to know that like you're like putting all this work into these bags and you should just probably go buy them.
Sounds like a fun project though.
It's super cool. And like it's also cool because we're using like a lot of things that are like they're like also more we have a friend that raises sheep and they like had one like get hit or it's like a coyote or something, but the like actual like hide was still good, so they tan the hide for us, and so we used the our friend's sheep like, and we left the wool like full length, so those are like our shoulder pads, and like it's cool to like, and we know the leather on it, the leather band, and so like it's cool to like see all the parts too that we're able to kind of piece together, and you get to kind of build it custom. And you know what, fuck it, even if it's not like the most perfect bag and someone's fucking gear snobbing us, like at least I like, you know, at least I'm trying.
Well, and it sounds like if you guys plan your trip the way you want, there's not going to be a gear snub within
I didn't
100
even
miles
think
of
about
you.
that. Fuck. That's awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
that's
mean,
great.
yeah, it's important to like also just keep trying stuff too, you know. It's like I don't know, maybe you hit something where you really like it and that becomes your new thing, and you combine machining with sewing, or maybe you make sewing machines, or you know, and it's like it's cool to like, I think like it's so important to keep trying stuff even if you're not good at it.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah, I think that learning and you know expanding your knowledge is so, I don't know, inherent to like the human condition. Like
Hmm.
I don't know. I feel like I could just be like, why live anymore if I'm not going to keep learning?
I was like, and then when I drive to work, I was listening to one of those like survival guides. It's like there's nothing. This is like fuck. I'm probably gonna make. I'll get made fun of. But like I'm driving in my electric car in San Francisco, listening to a fucking survival guide on the radio, right, on how to fucking make a fire in the fucking forest. Like driving by the fucking headquarters of Google, right? Like I'm just like, this is the irony of this is so bad,
Yeah,
but
that
you
is
know,
great.
it was pretty funny. It was like it was good, and it was like I was listening to. It was basically about like how to move fire. So it's actually a really difficult thing to move fire. And it's like how they kind of test people on their skills too. So the idea is basically you like, you know, you have to move it from campsite to campsite over like multiple days and keep it going. And so I was like so intrigued by how technical and how detailed it is to be able to do this. And I was like, damn, this is also how I start a forest fire.
Yeah, I wouldn't even know where to start. Like, what do you construct to move fire?
You basically just like kind of wrap it in moss and you keep it like as like ember, you know?
Oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense.
And you're like there's different ways of doing it, but like that was one of the examples, is like, you know, to basically not smother it but also keep it at this point where it keeps the heat and keeps going. So it was pretty wild. Like, you know, it's interesting to listen to that kind of stuff. I mean, people have people have some pretty amazing skills out there. They're definitely going to make it when when shit gets crazy.
Yeah, for sure. Well, the other question I ask every guest is, what are the things you are working on to be a better person, leader, employee, what have you? None of us are perfect and we're all working on stuff. So what's yours?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's always hard because it's there's I think it's like, you know, it's sometimes hard when you get in this like more manager role. There's people have so much stuff going on, and sometimes it's hard to like, you know, it's hard to like remember that like people have these crazy lives. Like I sometimes get in these modes where I'm like, oh fuck, we can do more. Let's go faster. Let's go. And I just have to remember sometimes. And so I've been really working on that, like to make sure that like my team is healthy and my team is stoked and like they want to work on the projects I want to work on. And once we get into rhythm, like we move faster than anyone else, you know, but it takes like sometimes I just have to like keep my damn mouth shut. This is a hard thing to do, as you can tell by our 6-hour podcast.
We'll get there one day. Well, Jeff, thank you so much for the time again. I really appreciate you coming back on and updating us all on, you know, all the cool stuff you're doing. Astranis sounds like it sounds like such a perfect fit for you.
Oh, it's a blast. I mean, it's like also like if there's anyone out there listening and they're and they're, really interested about the aerospace industry and like are, excited about where things are going. I mean, definitely check out the website, watch some of the YouTube videos. We have a bunch of YouTube videos coming out. It's super cool. It's Check out the job boards. We have a bunch of roles popping up here in like the next few months. We're looking for like a CMM quality person. We're looking for planners. We're looking for machinists. We're going to really ramp up. We just hired another aerospace welder. That's going to be super fun. So we're basically just really focused on kind of ramping in a sustainable way. But yeah, I mean, like check out the website if you're looking for opportunities. Yeah, good to be part of a cool team on a cool project and just always having fun.
Awesome. Well, yeah, if you give me the Astranis jobs link or whatever, I'll throw it in the show notes as well.
Sure. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. One more time, where can people find you online?
OnlyFans? No. Gotta make money somehow. No. Cuttingtime.com. Like Instagram's the easy one. But yeah, like, if you got questions, whatever, feel free to reach out. I'm usually pretty good about getting back to people. If they got questions about like how to do things or whatever, I always am intrigued what everyone else is working on. So it's super fun. So Instagram, LinkedIn, cuttingtime.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Thank
Cool.
you to all the Patreon members who make the show possible. Thank you all for listening, and I will be back next week.